All right, we're recording. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Metaphysical Bible Hangout. If I seem a little extra excited, it's because Jordan got his next belt. He advanced to, it's called a white yellow stripe. So it's at this age, this particular school, instead of going from like belt to belt, that they have a white belt and they advance through the same color, I guess, paradigm, and then and then they graduate to like a full yellow belt and a full green belt and then a full and it goes on and on. But at this age, from age 5 to 7, everything is really about character. Everything is about what are you can you keep yourself still. His testing began with 55 seconds of stillness. So it was powerful. I'm so proud of him, and I didn't know what to expect, and I was so nervous that he was going to be dismissed. Those of you who followed I've been very transparent with a lot of the things that we have worked with him, and one of those things has been just keeping your hands to yourself, not tackling the kids in class and stuff like that. So for him to make this, to advance, it's just, I'm on cloud 9. So let's get into the class, because we're also at my favorite part of history. I have to think about like why I love this part of history, but maybe it's because it answered so many questions, so many things, that it dispelled so many myths and just kind of cracked open a lot of stuff that I didn't have an understanding about. All right, let's take a moment to just center ourselves. We're going to start on page 49 and just acknowledge that there is only one power and there is only one presence. And that power, that presence is God, the good, omnipotent, the everywhere, evenly present spirit of absolute good. And so I just acknowledge that this spirit is present right now, whether you're attending live or you are even watching this back, that there is something that the Spirit has for you, and that we are being given instruction, not just in just how to view our Bible, but really how to get the fruit on the branches. Because what all of this adds up to is that there is a seed that God has planted inside of us that we are meant to take, to nurture, to sprout, and to build out into the most amazing, beautiful, loving, gentle, and kind expression imaginable. And so I just give thanks and praise that something said in this conversation tonight will support that. In the name and the nature of Jesus the Christ, I affirm that this is so, and so it is. Amen. All right. I switched up the PowerPoint. So we are going to start. I think we'll get through the book of Samuel. We will see. So we're going to talk about the books of Samuel and Kings, the books of Samuel and Kings. So as a whole, the books of Samuel, they trace the last days of the period of the judges and the beginning of the monarchy. And monarchy is what goes in that blank. And so just to make sure that we're clear, so Israel comes out of Egypt, and then they have those 40 years in the wilderness where they are essentially, a generation is dying off. You've heard different theological perspectives of the generation that couldn't accept, they could come out of slavery, but they couldn't accept the promised land. So that consciousness had to die off. But essentially, that generation dies off, and led by Joshua and Caleb, they go in and possess the land. But we saw last Thursday that it wasn't a full conquest of Canaan, that there were discrepancies even inside of Joshua in terms of their success. And we talked about the different reasons that writers may have for sharing that. And also, the fact that we are not running away from those discrepancies in the Bible, and that metaphysical interpretation is one of the ways that we are able to allow the text to exist as it is, but extract from the text some of the spiritual truth that doesn't need the facts of the story to be accurate, accurate and factual and inerrant. And we said that it is no sin or disgrace to say that the Bible is not inerrant, it is not infallible, that you can see the fingerprints of humankind all across it, and that's not a faith shaker. That doesn't, just because there are discrepancies doesn't mean you take it and toss it out, throw out the baby with the bathwater. That there is spiritual truth in our Bible that transcends the factual data. And there are ways that through time, this isn't a modern invention, this has been going on. It is as old as the Bible, if not older. There have been modern inventions of how you extract the spiritual truth. And one of those ways is through metaphysical interpretation. So the Israelites come out of slavery, they're in the wilderness, and then what happens is that they go in and they settle in an area in Canaan. It is very clear from the writing that it is not a full conquest of the promised land. They essentially find an area of land in the promised land that they settle in. And there are other tribes, and there's a lot of intertribal warfare. They can't agree. Sometimes different tribes connect with others, and then they gang up on another tribe. But there's all kinds of infighting, and they haven't been able to really do a good job of governing themselves. And so one of the things that happens in that time period is you have a series of what are called judges that emerge, but they're not judges in the way that we talk about judges. They're judges in the sense that they are military leaders. And so you have people like Ehud and Deborah and Gideon and Jephthah and Samson. Samson probably being one of the most famous of the judges, that they are really military leaders, and they are essentially defenders of Israel. So what happens when we get to then the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, it is the last days of the period of the judges. The prophet Samuel has emerged, and the people begin to demand a king. They feel like if they have a king, that having a king is going to solve their problems. And so they basically tell Samuel they want a king. So the period of Samuel was the last judge. The period of Samuel, he is the last judge. I said prophet, I should have said judge. But again, he's a military leader. The period of Samuel, the last judge, and Saul, the first king, marked the most desperate moments of danger Israel had ever faced, because they're changing their governance. It would be like the U.S. consciously making the decision to shift from being a democratic republic to being a socialist republic. And there are people, of course, today that are absolutely arguing that we're already there with the different programs that are in place for that support individuals. The call for, a minimum wage the pushback has been that it's a socialist attitude to dictate the minimum that you can pay someone. So you're talking about a national identity that everything could go wrong. They have a military leader, and they are saying that what they want to go from is from being led by a series of military leaders to being led by a king. In a kingdom, the king sets the rules. So individual autonomy, there is no individual autonomy. The king is responsible for everything. And so the king is responsible, but the people are subservient on a level that Israel has never known. So this is a very, kind of desperate moment for the people, and everything really could fall apart at this point. The following reigns of David and Solomon, who they come after Saul, they mark the highest success that the nation would ever achieve. David and Solomon. David and Solomon is what goes in that blank. And under David, which we'll see, they end up achieving a level of success that is pretty much unprecedented. It is just, it's unheard of. And it is a level of success that ultimately they won't repeat. David ends up getting called the apple of God's eye because he achieves a level of success in the kingdom that really does not get repeated. He achieves a level of success that even his son Solomon, who is a phenomenal leader and very well respected, even his son Solomon doesn't achieve what David does. And Solomon is the one that builds the temple. Hang on for 1 second. All right, moving on. So the first and second books of Samuel, what happens is that they form a transition from the loose tribal league. And so remember, we saw that last time. It's a series of judges. There are 12. There's 12 major judges and 6 major judges and 6 minor judges. And they are the military leaders of this loose tribal league that has been enforced since the time of Joshua to the strong centralized state that is forged by David and Solomon. Tribal league is what goes in there. And I'm still on page 49. Now, I want to talk about Samuel. Samuel is a very important figure because he is at the nexus point where Israel is changing the way that she is governed. So in the first and second chapter of 1 Samuel, he is born to Hannah. It is a very familiar story in the sense that Hannah is barren, and she prays to God for a son. And is the angel comes and basically comes to Hannah and says, yes, you will have a son. And she goes and tells her husband, and she makes a promise that she will consecrate him to God. This is a promise. If you go to 1 and 2 Samuel, the promise that Hannah makes to the angel is that she will consecrate Samuel to God. What she was agreeing for him to be is what is called a Nazirite. A Nazirite. There's only 1 or 2 other people that had that same call on their life in the Bible that we have, but it was a class of person where they were basically consecrated to God. Remember what we said, that to consecrate something to God is to make it holy. And holy was not about necessarily righteousness, but it was about being set apart for the work of God. So consecrating Samuel to God is essentially saying that he is going to be set apart for the work of God, that he is a holy man. If it's not holy, it's profane, but not profane the way that we talk about the word profane today. Profane means that it's just common everyday use. You know, this iPad where I have my notes is profane because it's used on a daily basis. This pen is profane. If this pen, let's say, were set aside and it only signed documents that pertain to Up Church, let's say, or the management of Up Church or something like that, then it would be holy. I'm reminding you of this because I don't want this to drop from your mind. We have different definitions in the 21st century of what it means to be holy and what it means to be profane. And profane in a modern mind is dirty, sinful, heathen. I mean, like all you just name it, like profane. In fact, how about we look up a definition while we're doing that? If we define profane, pull up a good definition. So to be profane is to defile, to debase, to degrade, to contaminate, to pollute, to taint. You know, this is that something that's profane is considered violated in some way. It's disrespectful. The verb profane means to treat something sacred with irreverence or disrespect. So again, that's a modern way to see it. Biblically, the word profane just means that it was common everyday use, that it wasn't something that was set apart for the service to God. Okay, so Samuel has been set apart for the service to God by his mom, by the promise that his mom, Hannah, makes to the angel. And so after he is born, she takes him to the temple at Shiloh and leaves him there, and he is raised in the temple. And so we learn of his development if you go to 1 Samuel chapter 3. 1 Samuel chapter 3. In 1 Samuel chapter 7, he defeated the Philistines at Mizpah. He defeated the Philistines at Mizpah. Now remember, he's a judge. So it's not a judge the way that we think about a judge in today's world. He's a judge like a military leader. And then the people begin to clamor for a king. The people want a king. And so in chapters 9 and 10, Saul is chosen by Samuel to be the king. Saul is chosen by Samuel to be the king. And then on in the 12th chapter, 1 Samuel, Samuel delivers his farewell speech. I'm now at the top of page 50. And then Saul makes a grave mistake, and Samuel rejects Saul. And we see that rejection in the 13th and the 15th chapter of Samuel, 1 Samuel. And then in the 16th chapter, some of you are familiar with this story, where Samuel goes to Jesse and asks about his sons, and he's got these great military sons, and he's like, no, you have somebody else. And basically David, who was pretty and fair, he's the errand boy, he's the one that takes food to his brothers at the front line. He is the one that Saul anoints to be king in place of Saul. Now, Saul is not gone. Saul is still there. And then in chapter 25, Samuel dies, and he's buried at Ramah. So that's the timeline for Samuel. Saul was a valiant warrior, and he wins many battles against the Philistines. The Philistines are kind of like the mortal enemy. They would be like today's China or yesterday's Russia. I guess we're not fighting Russia no more. Saul was a valiant warrior, and he wins many battles against the Philistines, but he never manages to completely unite Israel. He never manages to completely unite Israel. And this is what Israel has been wanting. They believe that the intertribal warfare that they are experiencing would be solved if they had a king as a leader. And so they go to Samuel to say that they want a king, and Samuel chooses Saul. There are some scholars who believe that the choice of Saul was intentional, meaning that even though he could have chosen, anyone, he chose someone who had some real serious issues that, in a sense, he knew Saul was unstable. He knew, when somebody is they touched, and so in a lot of ways, he possibly chose Saul because Saul could be manipulated. He possibly chose Saul because he knew that Saul would be hot-headed and would possibly self-implode. And ultimately, that's exactly what happened. Saul basically implodes. Saul was a moody man with a rash temperament. That's what goes in that blank. He was a moody man with a rash temperament, and he lacked organizational ability. These negative traits proved to be his undoing. He was rash, and he couldn't get anything together. You know, if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to unite people, you can't make rash decisions. You can't be all up in your feelings. If you are all up in your feelings, what happens is that it's like you're mercurial, that people don't know if they can trust you. They don't know whether or not you're hot, you're cold. They don't know whether or not they can follow you. They don't know what every day is going to bring. And when you have that kind of temperament, you get the murmurers. You know, what we're going to see next week with David is that David is a vision caster. That part of what enables David to unite the people is that he gives them a direction that they can move in, and instead of just allowing them to flounder. And so it's a really powerful study in leadership, because Saul had the ability to be a good leader. He was clearly, a valiant warrior. He's clearly somebody who could demonstrate what Israel needed, which was a strong leader who would lead them in battle. But he had no mastery over himself. If you're going to lead, you're going to have mastery over yourself, meaning that stuff is going to come up. And you're going to need to be able to master your emotions. You're going to need to be able to walk yourself back from the ledge. If every time you go off, somebody else has got to come and walk you back from the ledge, then it messes with people's ability to trust you. And so this is what's happening with Saul, is that he's not trustworthy. You don't know what he's going to do. And so you can't rely on his judgment, because you don't know whether he's in a temper tantrum or if he's, actually lucid. He turned Samuel against him with his arrogance. He turned Samuel against him with his arrogance. He turned Samuel against him with his arrogance. He almost executes his own son, Jonathan, because of a rash oath he took. He almost executes his own son, Jonathan, because of a rash oath he took. And again, this is a leader that you can't trust. I mean, okay, I'm leading up church, right? And I got Jordan, and I make an oath: if we're not able to get into our own building, I'm going to, put Jordan up for adoption. What? Like, what are you doing, Sam? What are you doing, Saul? Like, where's your head? So he does not make wise decisions. He's not someone that you can lean on. And the thing about leadership is that you are running ahead and upholding an ideal. It doesn't mean that you're perfect, but it means that you set an ideal, you take that ideal and you present it to the people, and you get the people to buy into the ideal. Well, then the people are looking at you to be the chief upholder of the ideal. If you set the ideal to be on time, start on time, everything, starts on time, and you show up late, your people can't trust you. So Saul has habits that make him untrustworthy. He won't hold up the ideal. And so he's not someone that you can bank on. And so what you get with a leader like that is you get people who, as long as he's in leadership and let's say his ship hasn't come in, his time hasn't run out, people may follow you, but they're following you now for their own ends. People may follow you. I'm sure that there were people that were following Saul who were saying, no, he's a good leader. Oh, and they were making excuses for his rash temperament. But they didn't really believe in him. He was simply a means to an end. And the moment that he was out of power, they wouldn't give him the time of day. But as long as he is in power, they're willing to act like he's the greatest thing since sliced cheese. I don't know if any of this sounds familiar. You know, I don't know if any of this sounds familiar, but the rash temperament, the people who are so-called following, I imagine there are always a couple of diehards, the diehards who, they're just blind faith followers. But by and large, the people who follow people who have rash temperaments, because they can't trust the person, it becomes about self. They're not working for something larger. It becomes about self, and they're with that person for as long as their needs are met. The moment their needs are not met, they're out the door. Or the moment they find a better way to get their needs met, they withdraw their support. So, yeah, not making any commentary on present day. I'm just stating what's in the Bible. He persecutes his most promising follower, David. Oh, that should have said follower, not following. He persecutes his most promising follower, David. One of the things, David was a model for me when I was working with Reverend Della. David never asserted himself, meaning that it was clear that he was the heir apparent, but he knew he was next in line, but he had no need to flaunt it. He had no need to flex, knowing that Saul's days were numbered and it was just a matter of time. And even when Saul would try to kill him, all kinds of stuff, that David played harp, right? And so his harp would soothe Saul, and it would relax him, and the mental illness that Saul suffered from, it would lull him into a space of comfort, and he could be dealt with in those spaces. But whenever he was on, say, that manic level where he's, spinning, he was not easy to be around and dangerous to be around, because he could try to take your life. And he definitely tried to take David's life many times. But David never retaliated. David never sought revenge. He never flexed on Saul. He never tried to play up that the people were more attached to him than they were to Saul. He simply allowed things to unfold in divine order. And in that season, when I was Reverend Della's assistant minister, and I didn't, you didn't know when she was going to retire, how she was going to retire. Some of you know the story of how it happened, because it was a surprise to everyone when it did happen. And so I really held David up as a model for just allow everything to unfold in divine order. That I don't need to get busy planning a whole bunch of stuff, because when the time is right, the time is right. And so David has been a model as a leader in some respects for me. There are other ways he's not a model, but in that way he was. Okay, so the Saul cycle. So in chapters 9 and 10, Saul is anointed king by Samuel, and he's presented to Israel. So this, again, so what we went through first was a timeline for Samuel. Now we're going through a timeline for Saul. So in chapters 9 through 10, Saul is anointed king by Samuel and presented to Israel. Essentially, that makes Samuel the king maker. If there's anything you want to be, is you want to be the king maker, because you then become the puppet master. Like I said, a lot of scholars believe that Saul was a purposeful choice, that Samuel knew that he was irrational, and he knew that ultimately Saul would self-implode. In chapter 11, he rescued Jabesh Gilead and was proclaimed king by Israel. He rescued Jabesh Gilead and was proclaimed king by Israel. This is a military defeat. And so now the people are acknowledging him for that. So, you know, he's anointed king by Saul, but the people still have to confirm the anointing. And so when he has this major military victory at Jabesh Gilead, then the people are behind him. He disobeyed Samuel by offering a sacrifice at I'm going to mispronounce this, but it looked like Michmash. He disobeyed Samuel by offering a sacrifice at Michmash. And this is chapter 13. Now, I want to go back here because remember, the sacrifices are things that are important. It's likely that where this is coming from the Southern Kingdom, because you've got this insistence on central worship. And so him offering a sacrifice at a non-sanctioned location is an indication that we're probably talking about a Southern writer, or for sure, this is that influence of the Deuteronomistic school, right? The Deuteronomistic school, it comes in, it restates. If you read in Deuteronomy, there's a restating of the Ten Commandments. It brings this very humanistic, ethical perspective to the Mosaic law. And but most importantly, it's concerned with centralized worship. Centralized worship. That you got to come to one place to worship God. And so and we said that Joshua and Judges are in that same Deuteronomistic school because they also emphasize centralized worship. And so here we see that same emphasis again when he is basically this is why Saul rejects him. Excuse me, I keep getting these names mixed up. This is why Samuel rejects him, because he makes this offer of a sacrifice at Michmash, and Samuel, which basically represents him worshiping a false god. And Samuel, who is a judge and is the upholder, essentially Samuel never stops being judge. I mean, he may have named Saul king, but he controls Saul. And if you're the king maker, then you can unmake the king. So he disobeyed Samuel by offering a sacrifice. That's what goes in that blank. Offering a sacrifice at Michmash. Saul battled the Philistines and he ordered Jonathan executed. Now, Jonathan is his son. He battled the Philistines and he ordered Jonathan executed. Again, this is his son. So he is rejected as king by Samuel in the 15th chapter. In the 19th chapter, he tries to kill David. He pursued but never caught David. That's what goes that blank, pursued. He pursued but never caught David. And then if you read in chapters 23, 24, 26, so you have this instance where Saul is after David, trying to kill him, but David doesn't take Saul's life. David doesn't take Saul's life. It's really a powerful story. This is what it says in the 26th chapter. It says the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah. I might be mispronouncing that. The Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is not David hiding on the hill of Hakilah, which faces Jeshimon?" So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 select Israelite troops. And again, that's a lot of troops to search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hakilah, facing Jeshimon. But David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? I'll go with you, said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, today God has delivered your enemy into your hand. The spear is by his head. He ain't got to go get the spear. The spear is by his head. But Abishai says, today, it's like, it don't get no better than this, dude. He right here. Today, God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now, let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice. Basically, I got one shot and I won't miss. But David said to Abishai, don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. Like, I don't know how he's going to leave this earth plane, but I know for sure he is. I'll get my time. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now, get the spear and water jug that are near his head and let's go. So David took the spear and water jug near Saul's head and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on top of the hill some distance away. There was a wide space between them. He called out to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, aren't you going to answer me, Abner? Abner replies, who are you who calls the king? David said, you're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your Lord, the king? Someone came to destroy your Lord, the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head? Saul recognized David's voice and said, is that your voice, David, my son? David replied, yes, it is, my lord, the king. And he added, why is my Lord pursuing his servant? What have I done and what am I guilty of? Now let my Lord, the king, listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me today from my share of in the Lord's inheritance and have said, go serve other gods. Now do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea as one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Come back, David, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. Here is the king's spear, David answered. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble. Then Saul said to David, may you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph. So David went on his way and Saul returned home. That's one of my favorite scenes because David could have taken his life, meaning he could have done something that would have killed him as a leader, even if he didn't take his life physically. And he made the decision, no, I'm not going to do that. That this in this season, this is who God chose to lead this group of people. And I honor that and I recognize that my time will come. And so that scene is one of my favorite battle scenes for David. And it's not even really a battle scene, but it is this this honor of, I don't have to, my time will come. What is mine, I will come by divine birthright. And I can rest in that. Grace says, it appears that David knew who he was and knew his time would come. Yes. The second book of Samuel deals with David's consolidation of power. That's what goes in that blank, consolidation of power. David was both a military and a political genius who ascended the throne by the free consent of the tribes. So the other thing that makes David amazing as a leader is that he brings everybody together, but it's not by warfare. He brings everybody together, but it's not by warfare. He's able to unite, he's able to consolidate power. Remember, they've been fighting amongst themselves. They haven't agreed on anything. They've been fighting amongst themselves. They don't get along. It looked like the whole nation was going to fall apart because they kept falling into their different factions. And so David, without bloodshed, basically unites the nation. Yeah. Ray says he certainly demonstrated faith and trust despite appearances. Great example. Yes. David, he captured the Canaanite city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites. He captured the Canaanite city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites. So Jerusalem was a Canaanite city. Remember what I said, that Joshua, if you read the book of Joshua, it would lead you to believe that they conquered all of the promised land, but they did not, because the Canaanite city of Jerusalem doesn't come under the rule of Israel until David. And so he captures the Canaanite city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites, and he made it both the religious and the political capital of Israel. It is the religious and the political capital of Israel. Canaanite is what goes in that blank. I'm at the bottom of 51. So now I want to go through the David cycle. And when when scholars say cycle, they mean the cycle of prominent events. That's what they're talking about, the cycle of prominent events in the life of a particular person. So that we're talking about the David cycle. So at the bottom of 51 and top of 52. Number one, he killed Goliath, and that happens in First Samuel chapter 7. That's what goes in that blank, Goliath. Number two, he's anointed king by Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 16. He's anointed king by Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 16. He befriended Jonathan. Jonathan was Saul's son. Jonathan was Saul's son, and he and David become best friends. He befriended Jonathan, and that happens in 1 Samuel chapter 18. He pursued Saul. This is all through pursued by Saul, chapters 18 through 30. So for virtually 12 chapters, Saul is after David. He's pursued by Saul, and he takes refuge in Philistia. He takes refuge in Philistia. In the first chapter of 2 Samuel, he mourned the deaths of Saul and Jonathan. Both Saul and Jonathan died. He mourned the deaths of Saul and Jonathan. 2 Samuel chapter 1. 2 Samuel chapter 2, he is anointed king over Judah. He's anointed king over Judah. So Judah is the southern kingdom. It is that land. Jerusalem is a part of that land. He is anointed king over the southern region. And then he is anointed king in 2 Samuel chapter 5 over Israel. Also in chapter 5, he captured Jebus and he made it the capital. He captured Jebus and made it the capital. And so if we go back just a little bit, what we said was that it was captured from the Jebusites, and it's the city of Jerusalem. And so basically he's capturing land that's in and around Judah, because Jerusalem will come to be considered part of Judah. Jerusalem is considered part of Judah, and so he captures that and brings it under the rule of Israel. He brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. He does this in 2 Samuel chapter 6. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, if you remember, it's Moses that's given instruction on how to build the Ark of the Covenant. And then the Ark of the Covenant becomes this symbol that when it's raised in battle, the Israelites fight on and they experience victory. And when it's lowered, when his arm gets tired, and it's lowered, then the people get weary and they can't fight. And so eventually you have soldiers that are propping his arm up, holding the Ark of the Covenant. So the temple is not built yet, but David brings the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, and it centralizes, again, remember the Deuteronomistic school is all about the centralization of worship. And so it centralizes worship in Jerusalem. He is given the Davidic covenant promises by Nathan. Remember, Nathan is the prophet. Nathan is the prophet. He's given the Davidic, hold on, 2 Samuel chapter 7. He is given the Davidic promises. So this is what it says. After the king was settled in his palace, excuse me, and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." And so he's thinking about this fact that, you know, I'm in this wood house of cedar, and we've got because the ark of the covenant was kept in a tent, what was called the tent of meeting, or the tabernacle. And he's saying, this doesn't seem right that I'm living better than God is living. Okay. Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." But that night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan saying, "Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all of your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on earth. And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. this adoption, this idea of adoption from God is a common idea. It's not something that's new with Jesus. It's just that we've been taught to highlight it with Jesus. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. And so David, Mary used to say, David has had a really good PR team. Everything is the house of David, the star of David, the Davidic covenant. But this is that Davidic covenant. And so Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation. So that's the Davidic covenant, basically, that God gives to David. Number 11, David committed adultery with Bathsheba. David committed adultery with Bathsheba. Bathsheba is what goes in that blank. In chapter 15 of 2 Samuel, he fled Jerusalem after Absalom's coup d'etat. He fled Jerusalem after Absalom's coup d'etat. In the 24th chapter, he built an altar on Araunah's threshing floor. He built an altar on Araunah's threshing floor. And in 1 Kings chapter 2, he died and was succeeded by Solomon. Solomon is his son, second son, with Bathsheba. And that is it. Oh, it took us right to 8 o'clock. Look at that. Look at there. Any questions on this? Though that's the first and second book of Samuel. The first and second book of Samuel. Any questions? Any aha moments? All right. So let's see. Something I will say. I will be sending out an email probably early tomorrow morning or super late tonight. I am doing a September Metaphysical Bible Challenge, and I hope that you guys will join me. I'm really excited to get started. The first challenge was really, really, really powerful. We had so many wins in that space, just with people just growing and learning how different ways to work on their dreams, having a system for working on their dreams. It was a really powerful exercise. It helped people get present to some of the habits that were interfering. You know, sometimes we always are asking the question, you know, why am I not growing, or why, or how can I grow? You know, how can I grow? How can I have more money, or how can I like advance in my career? But the thing is that all living things grow. All living things grow. And so the better question is, what am I doing that's keeping me from growing? What am I doing that's keeping me from advancing? And so what we did over those last 30 days is we got present to what are some of the things that are keeping you from growing. And we did it in a very gentle and wonderful way, but we got together at 5 a.m. Pacific. So the folks on the West Coast and the Midwest, y'all were cool, but I know my West Coast people were like 5 a.m. So I encourage you to be a part of the next Metaphysical Bible Challenge. It will be improved based on the feedback that I got from everybody in the existing challenge. And I'm just really proud and excited about this next challenge. So yes, there is a September challenge. It starts on Monday. Well, I guess that's Labor Day. It'll start on Tuesday, the challenge, but it's a 30-day challenge. All right. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening, and I will connect with you guys next week. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Hey, Fred. I love that. I love that. I love that. Yeah, you got to reach out. Good night, everybody. Have a great night.